Welcome to CPSB-TV, a podcast by teens for teens where we tell interesting stories that we like to share. This episode is Criminal to Christian, a story of a man who goes from a life of crime and addiction to being a hospice chaplain. A reminder that the past does not define your future and you may not always end up where you think you will. I'm Sanaya, and when I first heard this story, I was very interested to learn more. I was drawn in and wanted to hear his story. This is Mr. Jeffrey Hopper. This is our guest today. Mr. Jeffrey, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Certainly. Thank you for having me. And my story seems like something right out of a movie. I grew up, the first time I was incarcerated, I was 14 years old, and finally landed in prison for $1 million heist of the Stardust Casino, where in the middle of that sentence, I found Christ, or he found me. And 30 years later, I'm a hospice chaplain.
Mr. Jeffrey, may I begin questioning you now?
Sure.
Okay. Can you tell us a bit about your family dynamics growing up?
Absolutely. I grew up in what seemed like from the outside, a typical American family. But on the underside of everything, my father, the postmaster, organized a two-state theft ring, and how he would, when somebody would hold mail, he would orchestrate juveniles to go and burglarize the homes.
And you mentioned when we were emailing, battling addiction. Can you tell us what from and the ages?
Sure. Addiction started for me at the age of 14. It began with alcohol. As most teenagers experiment with alcohol, I had a ready source of it. And it escalated from there to a young adult in cocaine and acid and ecstasy and everything that I could, every substance that would allow me to not be me anymore.
Do you think that your addiction had any involvement in your heist, or was it just based off your family background?
It was a combination of the two. The addiction allowed me to do things that I normally wouldn't do. You know, addiction in alcohol allows us to be braver and bolder in things that we normally wouldn't do, or actually even desperate to achieve something that would set us aside, that would put us in with the money and the fame and everything that we need to have the life we want.
Was this a one and done, or was your family having like a background of committing crimes?
Sure. Besides what I went through as a juvenile, it was actually the second heist. I was working at a lumber yard when I got a call from my father, and he had been robbed at work. He was a security guard for the Stardust Casino. And I later found out that it was my brother who robbed him. It was the nature of our family that crime was something we did, and my father's philosophy was, if you weren't strong enough to hold on to what you had, you didn't deserve to keep it. And so if we could take it from you, well, then it was ours to have.
And were you involved in the planning? And if you weren't, how were you particularly involved?
Well, the planning was 9 months in Las Vegas, timing every single aspect, every step the security guards made, every place the cameras were. It was really in the sense of an Ocean's 11 story, but it was really more for rednecks instead of Ocean's 11. But we planned every detail, timed the guards and who would take a break and who would have a smoke break. And we did that for months on end, timing every step it would take to pull off the heist.
How old were you at the time of the heist?
At the time of the heist, I was 25 years old and had a 5-year-old daughter at the time.
Can I know how you were caught and the length of your sentence?
Certainly. One of the things that people never realized in the things that we do, there was a series of errors. And the FBI and the U.S. Marshals investigate, and they take their time. And at the second robbery, they had already suspected my father was involved, and he was. And so they began gathering evidence. And then there were little things that happened. We used 3 vehicles in the getaway. Well, one of the vehicles, there was a Dr. Pepper can that ended up with my brother's fingerprint on the can. And so that got him. And then it was people who, signed statements against us. And we had made so many errors that eventually it just took the time for them to put the investigation together, and then we were caught. And we knew it. I knew that this was going to fall apart long before they came for me. And the FBI and the U.S. Marshals pursued me from Las Vegas to Beaumont, Texas, where they finally caught up to me and arrested me.
How long was your sentence and what were you charged with?
I was charged with actually interference with interstate commerce by violence, because the state couldn't put together any charges. They couldn't prove that we were in Las Vegas, but we had went across state lines with cash, and they charged us also. They charged my father with the RICO Act, which is 2 or more people involved in 2 or more crimes. It allows the federal government to get involved, and they were able to arrest us all. They arrested everybody in my family at that point.
And were you in a regular facility, or was it something more high security?
I started off in a high security level, but in the system, if you behave, you go down in levels. And I ended up in a facility just outside of Dallas in Seagoville, Texas, a low-level federal facility.
Was there like a specific moment that led you to Christ, or was it like a series of events?
Well, I'd love to tell everybody that it was this miraculous, moment of change, but it actually came from prison fellowships and Angel Tree Ministries. And what they do is they give gifts to the children of incarcerated parents. And when I first signed up for it, it was really, I was getting Christmas gifts for my daughter, who was 6 years old at the time still. And when she came back that Christmas day to tell me about what the pastor had told her, that God loved me no matter what I had done, that all she needed to do was pray and trust in what God does for everybody. And, in prison is one of those places you don't break down, you don't cry, you don't show emotion, because then everybody sees you as weak. And so the first time in the 2 years that I was there at that facility, I went to the chapel, in the prison chapel, where I met the chaplain for the first time. And the room was full of hardened criminals bawling their eyes out. And that night, Christmas Day, I gave my life to Christ. And it has been an over 30-year journey that it was because of other people. My change came from people who would answer my phone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning. It came from people praying for me and encouraging me. And at times, even when I was at my lowest and still an alcoholic up to 7 years ago, that these are the people that would come pick me up when I couldn't drive home anymore. And so I would love to tell you that it's the miraculous something that happens for people instantaneously, but it's not. It's planting a seed and nurturing it and working on it and letting it grow.
What specifically led you to the role of being a hospice chaplain?
Okay. For me, the first introduction to a chaplain was the prison chaplain. And so whenever I attended seminary, I never saw myself as pastoring a church. We live at a place where there's churches on every corner. There's churches all over the place, and you can find one. And now with technology, you can find church online. I wanted to be a chaplain from the very beginning. And again, I would love to tell you that it was this miraculous plan that I had orchestrated. I found an advertisement on southeasttexas.com asking for a hospice chaplain, and I didn't really know what that was. And I went and spoke to them and interviewed with them, and I knew then that that's what I was called to do. Because of my background in battling addiction and going through prison, I knew that no matter what somebody told me at that moment of their life, I wanted to be the guy there that was at the end of their life, that would be able to share the mercy and grace of God, that would be able to tell them, no, you're okay. You will, God will forgive you. And that's what I do every day now.
Is there any stories that you like to compare your own to?
Well, I'd love to compare it to something fabulous like Ocean's 11, or, one of my favorite franchises is the Pirates of the Caribbean, and I say this jokingly, but it's not. And what I've had to do over the years is the very beginning of that first movie, Pirates of the Caribbean, Captain Jack is bailing out his boat. He's trying to keep it from sinking, which has been my life all the time, right? My early part of my life. And then as he's coming into the harbor, he steps off on the ship as it's sinking, and he walks on the dock. That was my life. Every single time something I was about to fail, and I would just step off into the next, until I began in earnest trying to finish things and trying to straighten my life out for the sake of my children. Because my daughter, who's now 38, I also have sons that are 22 and 18. And I wanted to be the father for them that broke those generational curses, that broke the inheritance that my father tried to give to me. And so now the hardest thing that I have to do is living that Leave It to Beaver life, that ordinary life that everybody else lives, and go to work and complain about traffic and complain about the price of eggs and everything else that everybody else does. And so if I could compare it to something, it would be Pirates of the Caribbean meets Amazing Grace.
Are there any messages that you'd like to give teens about addiction?
Absolutely. Seek help. Get the support from people. Find people that are going through similar things that you are. That there are people out there that will line up to help you, and you can rebuild your life. There's nothing that will stop you from rebuilding your life but you. And sometimes, even though you have dreams and you have things in your life, that they end up burning to the ground, and you think that that's it. Nothing is more true than sometimes the most beautiful things that you will be built on the ruins of your dreams, the things that you thought were going to be everything. But find the people who will cheer you on. Find the people that will walk with you, that will answer your phone at 3 o'clock in the morning. And believe in yourself. Love yourself enough to do the best that you can do. That's what I would encourage teens to do.
Can I ask you about your book series?
Sure. The series Thief in the House, there's one book, Ordinary Life is the subtitle, and it is about everything growing up. It is about the heist. It's about the addiction. And after that, there are 3 other books. And the second book in the series is Dirty Vegas Streets. It is about what took place during that time and what we were doing, and strong-arm robberies of people in the parking lots and things of that nature. The third book is a little more, depends on how you see things. It's called Echoes of the Fugitive Road. There was my father, who's still alive. He is in a nursing home in Vidor, Texas. Dementia has set in, and he is telling everybody that he has money buried in the desert, which he may. I don't know if that's true or not. But the point of the story is that the money and what I put in that third book really isn't the treasure. Okay? The treasure is the life that we have now, that all my family, we speak to each other, we go to dinner together, we laugh and tell jokes about how old and how noisy our bones are when we get up in the morning, because we're all getting older. And the last one, called The Final Heist, is about that. It is about everything about the message and how the final heist is stealing back the time that I lost with my daughter, who now is 38. We have a wonderful relationship, and it takes time. So those 4 books really are the message in different parts of my life.
Your story captivated the attention of producers. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Discovery Channel actually contacted me a few months ago and was interested in doing an episode for their series called Hustlers, Gamblers, Crooks. And the wonderful thing about that is that I've had other people that wanted to do the story, but they didn't want the chaplain part of it. Well, Discovery said they wanted from convict to chaplain. They wanted the whole story, and I agreed to do it. And that is going to air in the next few months. And my hope really is something like that show with millions of people watching would be turn the attention to people who suffer from addiction, who suffer from these things, to encourage them to rebuild their life.
And before we close, are there any last-minute topics or messages that you'd like to say?
I'd like to emphasize again to everyone, to the teens, to the the people out there, the adults. The children oftentimes have questions about their parents who are incarcerated, about their doubts about themselves, but to believe in themselves. They, no matter what, can make a difference, and they can change their lives. It takes work, but to surround themselves with the people that believe in them.
We'd like to give a big thank you to Mr. Jeffrey for coming and sharing his story today.
Thank you for having me. It was really a pleasure and honor to be part of this.
That wraps up this episode of Criminal to Christian. We hope you enjoyed our discussion, and thank you for tuning in. I'm Sanaya Payne.